Bahar. Let's go right across to Berkeley. Yes, Robert Reich. President Obama terms, according to New York Times this morning, his trip to Asia about creating jobs, and the idea is to take a bunch of companies there and find markets for the U.S. goods. Of course, the Asian countries are looking for their goods to be sold here. Now, how will this play out? They're trying to sell goods in your market, you're trying to sell goods in their markets.
Well, it's not a zero-sum game in which we gain only to the extent that Asia loses and vice versa. No, it can be a positive-sum game and should be. The problem is that there is only one instrument of international economic policy that the United States now has, and that is monetary policy, the Federal Reserve Board. Congress is not going to use an expansive fiscal policy now that Republicans are in control of the House of Representatives. And that means that the Fed's efforts to expand the money supply here in the United States will push down interest rates here in the United States, already have. And long-term interest rates will also go down here in the United States. Well, what that means in turn is that international investors, including investors here in America, will no longer be quite as attracted to the United States as a place to put their money. They will go elsewhere. They're already going into Asia into a greater extent than they were before, and this puts downward pressure on the dollar. If the dollar continues to move downward, American exports will become more attractive, but that puts other countries in a bind, because that means that their exports will become relatively less attractive. I don't anticipate a currency war, but I do think that as economic policy moves from fiscal policy to monetary policy here in the United States, that pressure on the dollar and the pressure for more exports, and those exports are linked to jobs, will cause some international frictions.
So what do you think, for the benefit of our international audience, what does the United States need to do to open its market at the same time and then find a market for itself so that the friction that you talk about doesn't arise?
For one thing, we need in the United States something that we're not likely to have right now, and that is a fiscal stimulus. Republicans in the House of Representatives don't like the idea of a fiscal stimulus. They don't want to spend more government money. They don't want tax cuts designed for a fiscal stimulus. And so that means that the U.S. economic recovery is going to continue to be quite anemic, quite slow. We saw this morning that 159,000 new private sector jobs were created in the United States. Well, that may sound pretty good, but we need 125,000 new jobs just to keep up with the increase in our population and the increase in people available for work. So that means, in other words, only about 25,000 new net jobs for Americans, which is a drop in the bucket relative to the 22 million that we are behind in terms of people who have come into the market and have not got jobs, people who have lost jobs, people who are too discouraged even to look for work. So for one thing, we are still going to be in trouble.
It's about jobs, Navbahor.
Well, let's turn to our panel here. Perhaps one of the most powerful political advertisements on TV in this election campaign was the one about the Chinese impact on the U.S. We saw a Chinese professor explaining his students how America will eventually fall as a global power. What do you make of it, Jim Roberts?
Well, I think that so much attention on the Chinese yuan and its relative value to the dollar really misses the point. And I would disagree with Secretary Reich. I do think that the Congress and the Republicans can be expansionary if they cut spending and maintain the Bush tax cuts to give private investors the incentive to create new jobs. We're on track right now under the Obama administration to double the U.S. national debt by the year 2020 to $20 trillion, an unthinkable amount. That really can't happen. What we need are Congress to approve and the President to push for the 3 pending free trade agreements with Korea, Colombia, and Panama. We need to focus on structural reforms of the U.S. economy, cutting the deficit, cutting spending. That will be the long-term stimulus and the long-term job creator.
Well, thank you. Scheherazade, Rehman, economic problems have left many in this country to question the value of foreign assistance. We know that President Obama raised the foreign aid from $20 billion a year to $40. Do you think that amount might change?
I think so. I think that the American people voted, but they voted for change, but they also have voted in gridlock. I don't think much is going to change. I think the key, and I agree with Bob Reich, is the American consumer. I think we forget that we are a $14 trillion economy, more than triple the size of China by any means, and them catching up to us will take a long time. But the American consumer makes up 80% of our GDP. If consumer confidence is not back in this country, we won't go anywhere. And that's the bedrock of recovery in this country.